Tom Osman, and this is Whatever Comes Next, the podcast where I explore the world of underground and independent music making. And on today's episode, I am talking with guitarist, bass player, sometimes vocalist, recording engineer, mixer, masterer Greg Wilkinson, whose band Deathgrave are just about to release their third album, Hell is Evil, on the great Tankcrimes. The album coming out on August the 21st. And with Greg being in Oakland, California, prior to this interview, I thought to myself, he has probably worked with Layla Abdul Rauf and Luca Indrio, both of whom I have interviewed before. Had I gone to the effort of looking through his credits on Discogs, I could have realized that, yes, he has worked with both of them extensively. And in fact, he worked with Layla on her latest record, Andros Insidium, for which I interviewed her on episode 134 of this podcast. So, yeah, and he's also worked with her loads of other times. So, yeah, I could have done my research better. Going way back through the sands of time, I spoke with Luca Indrio of Necrot all the way back in episode 21. And going even further back than that, I interviewed Scotty Heath of Tankcrimes back on episode 6, before I was even doing videos. So if you want to check out that interview, you need to go to Substack or Apple or Spotify. I don't really talk about them that much anymore. As well as talking with Greg about his music with Deathgrave and the latest record, there was an opportunity to chat with him about Autopsy and how he ended up joining the band a few years ago and doing some excellent work with them on their recent releases. And yeah, talking about some of his work behind the desk and other such delightful punk, hardcore, metal topics that we do get into in this conversation. And what a lovely fellow he was, I must say. All of that being the case, you can follow Deathgrave on Instagram. You can also follow them on Bandcamp, where you'll see updates of shows they've got coming up. They do have a show to support the release of the record on the 11th of September at the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco, California. Another update which Greg had at the end of the interview was that another one of his bands, Static Abyss, are actually going to release their latest record, The Dying Hunt, on Peaceville Records a week after the Deathgrave album on August the 28th. And as I discovered from Greg in this interview, the latest Static Abyss record features Chad Gailey on drums, also of Necrot. So it's a small world indeed in Oakland, California. And with all of that said, you can get the forthcoming Deathgrave record from Tankcrimes. You can get the Static Abyss record from Peaceville, as mentioned. You can follow me at Tom Osman Sounds. You can go to my website, tomosmansounds.com. Check out my music on Ampwall and on Bandcamp. And I think that is all that needs to be said. So, Greg Wilkinson of Deathgrave, Autopsy, Static Abyss, and more. Take it away. Well, Greg, Tom, pleased to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
So
how's it going?
Good.
Good.
It's common for me to interview people who are on the other side of the world. I'm in Glasgow in Scotland. What time
Oh,
is it
nice.
where you are at the moment?
Right now it is about noon, 12
Okay.
o'clock.
Am
Yeah.
I am I several interviews into your day?
No. So I actually was doing a bunch of studio stuff before. So I was like editing. I was like, oh, it's time. So
I see some what look like soundproofing boards behind you, so I guess this is a recording area for you.
it is. Yeah, this is my control room.
And so,
So
yeah, like you've got a whole bunch of different projects that you are involved with. Is this like where you tend to work?
yes, yeah, this is my main studio. It's called Earhammer, based in Oakland. So I do mainly, a lot of metal bands and rock and punk and noise and that kind of stuff here. So it's usually some form of extreme music.
Yeah. Yeah, it was funny. I was looking at your profile on Metal Archives, and I was intrigued because it happened to say in your bio, it's like also works with analog electronic noise and field recordings. It's like, all right.
Yes. Yeah, I haven't done that as much lately. It just I've kind of gotten real busy with the usual more typical traditional band stuff. But especially in the early 2000s, I used to tour doing that kind of stuff. It was kind of mainly influenced off of stuff like, Wendy Carlos, like her sonic seasoning stuff, where she would go and incorporate analog, recordings. She'd go out and record wolves or whatever, and then do kind of electronic music or more ambient stuff. It's not really, I don't know if you call it music, it's just soundscapes and stuff. And
Yeah.
so
No, I know what you
I
mean.
got really into that
Yeah, I've
for a
ended up
while.
collaborating with people that do various noise stuff or field recordings, and I sometimes am not sure if I should say it's music or if it's like, I don't know, it's like kind of sound experimental stuff. I don't really know what to call it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's soundscapes.
So does this mean that you are fully in the music making world? Like, do you make a living out of music one way or another, or do you have another job separate?
No, so my main income is recording, mixing, mastering. So that's where most of my income comes from. And then I definitely get some supplemental income, especially with Autopsy and stuff. And when we do
Yeah.
shows, it helps out for sure, kind of, you know, throughout the edges in my financial life. But most of my income really comes from just, doing the production side of things. So this has been my day job. I've been doing this for a little over 22 years.
Does it feel like a job or does it still feel like some kind of like pleasure to be doing it on the whole?
It feels like a pleasure for the most part, but it can feel like a job when deadlines get tight and things happen. So it's still I still get reminded it's a job every here and there, but overall I'm really grateful for it, and I didn't really imagine this would be my career in a way. As a kid, you're thinking like, oh, it'd be cool to play music, and maybe it'd be that, but I'd be lucky, but I'd probably have some crappy day job working in a warehouse, throwing boxes around and scanning or something like that. And so, it's just something that I kind of just took to it and got lucky with the environment of Oakland at the time. When I started the studio, there was kind of a disparity between studios that were, either really expensive and really good. So you can go to like somewhere like Fantasy and, where they're doing like Prince records and Metallica, or you can, you could find the occasional person. There was like Bart Thurber was around and Polymorph, but even Polymorph was really expensive for punk bands. You're paying like $55 an hour, and you're getting paid like maybe $20 to play a show. So a lot of bands were kind of struggling. And so it was kind of one of those things when I started the studio here, there was punk bands looking for punk and metal, musicians that understood what they were doing. And I felt like there was a whole upswing in the early 2000s here where a lot of punk and metal bands started getting traction and doing more and leaving the Bay Area, SF, Oakland, and going and touring. And so it kind of like helped drag. We all kind of grew together because it
Yeah.
was like an affordable option where people could take recorded material and spread the word. So, I think it was a good place and time. And then I was like, well, I guess this is my career now. I'm a producer. So
And
yeah.
being in Oakland, there are a couple of people that I've interviewed that I feel like your path will definitely have crossed with. I'm not actually sure if you've worked them directly. Layla Abdul Rauf and Luca Indrio.
Oh yeah, work with both of them. Yeah. So I do record and mixing and I sometimes mastering, but definitely recording and mixing for both of their bands like Vastum, Necrot, Acephalix when Luca was in that as well. I still work with Acephalix as well. So it's like I've crossed paths with them all the time. So
Yeah.
and then you'll be happy to hear. And then even Layla's solo record that just came out, I actually wound up mixing and mastering that as well for her. So I'm pretty much working with them all the time.
Yeah, that's cool. No, I really like that latest record. That's actually when I interviewed her, so I should have remembered that you were involved in that album. It's yeah, very, very cool, very atmospheric.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I just did what, I just took what she did, and then just made it more. She just wanted it a little like more punchy and clear than I think in some of her other stuff, just to kind of spruce it up. And so it's always great working with all of them, they're very creative. Layla's a very creative force, so it's always awesome when she's like, I have a new project, let's do this.
Yeah.
And same for Luca, like he's always bringing in monster riffs, so it's always cool to have him in here.
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine. So, talking about some of your music, obviously, Deathgrave are just, in fact, you have just released your latest record, Hell is Evil. Did it come out at the end of July last week? Is that right?
It's so we released a track. The actual release date is August 21st.
Oh, it's the 21st. I'm losing track of when things are coming out. So,
That's all right.
I,
It's a barrage.
yeah, time doesn't really exist after COVID now either. It's just all a blur.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I saw a quote in the press release where you said, "We allowed you to gaze into our neighborhood on our second album, It's Only Midnight. Hell is Evil will plunge you with haste into our whole world." So once you're ready to make the follow-up to the last record, how clear a plan did you have of where you wanted to take the music on the latest record?
I personally, as a riff writer on the record, I actually had a pretty solid, plan and direction where I wanted the record to go. I wanted it to get a little more extreme. So what had happened, for those who don't know Deathgrave and stuff, we started around 2012, 2013, and the way it started out was the concept of the band was to be a mix of rudimentary Peni with like siege style blast beats. We wanted to be kind of like grindy punk rock, but like, get the rudimentary Peni punk riffs in there, but we wanted to be faster and extreme. So everybody in the band kind of came from different directions. The drummer we had originally had was very new to drums, so I was going to San Jose like 3 days a week and jamming with him to kind of develop a drum sound, and he excelled real fast at getting good at what we were doing. But in the end, we never sounded anything like the concept of the band, because of the personnel and everything. So we did an album with the first drummer. We departed ways, and then when we got the second drummer, we were already kind of started writing It's Only Midnight before Clint joined, but it was just getting his Rolodex of drum beats and his style and stuff. I feel like It's Only Midnight. I'm really proud of where that record came out, and I was like, this is definitely in the direction of how I've always imagined Deathgrave. I think all of us really realized what everyone was capable of musically, and how they reacted to riffs and stuff. So with Clint now being in the band, he's been in the band now for since 2018, so it's been 8 years. When writing Hell is Evil, it was like I know exactly how the drummer, now that we know who the drummer is for this record from the beginning, I know exactly how he's going to react. I know how Fern's going to react on the bass, and Andre how he's going to react with the vocals. So now I was like, I know what everyone is capable of doing. So I want to take this, It's Only Midnight, but like go way more drastic and extreme. And so the whole record, I'm really proud of it. I feel like this is the first Deathgrave record from front to back that I feel like this is Deathgrave. This is the sound I've always wanted. And so for those familiar with It's Only Midnight, I think that this record, you're going to find it's faster, it's slower, it's weirder. The guitar playing on a personal level is like a little more. I got to explore my kind of guitar, playing style where I got to write riffs that have nothing to do with what the bass and drums are doing, but it just kind of still fits and stuff. And so yeah, I feel really good about it. I think if you dug It's Only Midnight, this is just a way more extreme version. It's not a departure though. I mean, we still sound like we do or just weird grind stuff, so
Yeah.
with some death metal in it.
Yeah,
So yeah, that's kind of where it goes.
Yeah, I really appreciate the extremity of the album, and I like the shifts that you've got between sections, the speed, like you say, some parts really slow it down, and there were parts where I really noticed the weird guitar playing. Like I really like Hard to Swallow. You got this weird kind of twisty passage that comes at the end of the track. That's really really cool, and as well on Won't See You in Heaven, you got this weird spidery guitar that goes on that track as well. Like they were two bits that really stood out to me.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Yeah, I love being able to do that kind of stuff, and on this record especially it was I felt like the opportunity was there, and it doesn't change the vibe or energy of the band. If anything, I felt like when we started kind of developing that guitar stuff, part of me was just kind of wanting to be, the guy in the background that was making the vocals sound more insane and fucked up. It's like adding this kind of weird background to kind of, because it's a record, you can't see Andre and all this crazy stage antics. So I kind of wanted to add that energy on the record, since you can't see it, and doing the weird spidery creepy stuff in the background kind of is
Yeah.
my way of being like, oh yeah, the singer's doing all this weird zombie goblin stuff, or whatever. So
Yeah, he does have some wild vocals. Like I think particularly I mean, it's all through the record, but Born from Death was one of the ones that stood out. Like some of the screams just sound completely demented.
yeah, yeah, it's crazy because he's the only person, who sings in the band, and he just has such a wide array of vocal styles and sounds, and it's actually fun, recording with him because, we have all these little inside references, or just be like, do this kind of do this person style, or do this or that, and of course it sounds his own way, but he nails it really well, and it's pretty fun to be able to work with somebody like that, because I know for me personally, when I do vocals, I don't have an insane Rolodex of genres and styles. I can do like a scream or a growl, or a clean thing, but I can't just be like this type of scream or this type of yell, or it's just insane to be able to find like dozens of references of sounds, that you could go for. And him this time on this record, he had this one vocal style where he was calling it the 1,000-year-old man. And he was like, I really want to use it on this record finally, And so we found a spot for it, in the middle of Smaller and Smaller. He does this vocal where he just sounds like a creaky old man, and we were also cracking up because it's just so funny, but it also works so well that we were like, yeah, we have to keep it.
That's cool. Yeah,
And
I'm gonna go
yeah,
back and listen to the Thousand-Year-Old Man after this interview.
yes, it's great.
So another person that I've interviewed actually, it was a while ago, but I interviewed Scotty Heath at
Oh,
Tankcrimes.
cool.
Great guy, does so many great stories as well. So tell me the story of how far back you go with him and with Tankcrimes.
So I've known Scotty. I mean, I don't know how old he was, but he's a little younger than I am, I believe, but like only like a year or two. But we all felt so young back then, It was like, I know I was in my mid-20s when I met him. He was doing a band called Deadfall, and he was the drummer for that. This was before he had a record label, and my band Brain Oil would play, we'd play Burnt Ramen together and that kind of stuff. And so I've known him through that. So I mean, I remember just seeing the whole inception, and then him starting Tank Crimes, and the whole phase. He actually put out, I was doing a band with Mouse from Dystopia and our friend John the Baker. We basically, John the Baker had written all these songs on acoustic guitar, and then we reimagined them with, like, bass and guitar, and he had a fantastic drummer, this guy George. And so, like, we actually, I believe, was it was one of the first Tankcrimes full lengths called John the Baker and the Malnourished Nothing. So I've known Scotty for a long time. I've been working with him for years as a record label and just as a friend and playing shows with him before. And then when he was in Votsec, I remember all those days. So I don't know. I'd say it's been 25 years plus, something like that.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that we've been around for that long.
I know. We've made it.
So I want to talk about the cover art as well. So you've worked with Max Rain, I think, for like all your albums, quite a few releases. I don't know how many there have been, like
Yes.
six out covers. I don't know, like not albums, but six releases, maybe something
Yeah,
like
so
that.
we've done definitely 3 LPs with him. So he's done all our albums. And then we did last year we did a split with our friends from Japan called Black Canyon, and he did the cover for that. And then he's done a couple 7 inches for us, like split 7 inches and stuff that we've done. Specifically, I remember the Endorphins Lost one, which was amazing because looking at American politics now, it's insane that, I believe we did that in like 2015 or 14. And we were like, Brandon and I, when we were doing the split, we're like, we want like a terrible, we basically want all these beautiful things being filtered through a completely terrible, like aristocratic asshole, and everything coming out ugly and like some nuclear missiles and death and all this stuff. And so his subject matter was picking Donald Trump was the and so
Who
he
knew?
made Donald Trump's like like a meat grinder basically, and then we're like, wow, this guy's our president now, Jesus, so like, but his brain is just so creative and so cool, and so he's a trained artist, and he actually can do so many different styles. So when we were doing Hell is Evil, he was like, hey, I got a couple questions, and then it was like, do you want Bosch or do you want this other thing, and so it's like going to an optometrist and it's like this or that, and then this or that, and he's like, do you want one subject matter or do you want more of like a kind of chaotic canvas and stuff? And so we were kind of like, let's do Bosch, let's go with like not one focal. We don't need like a focal central character. We want like a lot of little characters, so it's just a little more chaotic feeling. And so then, we were basically like, obviously, hell is evil. So we wanted, hell, and stuff. And then he just came out of the blue. It was like, it had been a couple weeks. And he said, hey, I got this idea. For some reason, I'm thinking like about putting this sinkhole in a parking lot. And so like just these people are being sucked into this, hell, and like hell is breaking out into the real world. And so if you look at the back of the album, you're actually looking inside the sinkhole up into the light with all these bodies falling into it. And then the front cover is obviously it's like this parking lot with just that's just collapsing and all these like monsters and demons and weird things are coming out and stuff. And, it was cool because we didn't actually see sketches or anything. It was just like, here it is. And that's kind of how he works. And every time he does it, you're just like, it's just amazing. You don't necessarily need a sketch because he's got the idea so worked out in his head. And he's very clear about communicating what the idea is. And we just trust him. So, I love what he did on this cover. Yeah, I mean every cover he does a great job, but yeah, he's
Yeah.
he's such a great artist to work with.
Yeah, it is really cool. There are so many cool little details, like the demonic woman that's sticking a knife through the foot. Like just all these cool
Oh
little things
yeah.
that you can focus in on.
Yeah, it's so cool. There's so many cool, and then there's like the weird character with the multiple sets of eyes, and it's just the whole thing is just really demented and twisted. And I feel like it's he's always like, let me hear the music and let me see the lyrics so he can get in the mindset. And it just seems like he just loops the music and just lets it take him where it goes, and and it just I don't know, man, his brain's like it's like stuck partially in another dimension or something. He's seeing some cool stuff over there.
Yeah, I think it definitely suits the music. I wanted to ask you quickly about Autopsy. So
Okay.
I'm sure when most people think of Autopsy, they'll immediately think of Severed Survival and Mental Funeral. But I really liked the recent album Ashes, Organs, Blood, and Crypts that you played on. So tell me about your first exposure to Autopsy. Do you remember the first time that you heard them?
I was really young when I heard them. I thought they were there was something really cool and demented about them to me because being a person who grew up liking punk and metal, that wasn't really a popular thing in like the 80s and early 90s. I remember like punks and metal people would like punch each other and they didn't get along and stuff. Just I don't there was like this ethos thing that I love now that they're kind of the same. And I felt like we had DRI did the crossover record, and that was like kind of like one of the first times where it was like, when you talk about hardcore, like traditional hardcore, like DRI and Poison Idea and bands like that, not the new stuff that's happening. Um, and so like that was like one of the first times when it was like, it's okay to like thrash and metal and also punk. And then like I felt like Autopsy had this thing being a kid that appreciated punk, I was like, this is metal, but it's punk and it's rock, it's everything, and it's just trashy and it's like really it's more punk than a lot of punk bands are because around the same time, a few years later, but like even in the late 80s, you started having like pop punk and like these more polished things pop up. And so definitely by like, 90, 91 when, Autopsy was like in heavy circulation, and stuff um it was like that's more punk than the punk bands that are playing Gilman right now, so I think that's really was a cool thing, but I didn't really get to see them until to my knowledge until they reformed in the 2000s. I didn't get to see it live, and I was reaffirmed like this is more punk than a lot of punk that's around, and it's more metal than a lot of metal bands too, just because it's got so many it captures elements of thrash and punk and doom and all the different facets of metal and stuff. It's like such a wide range. So the first time I'd actually worked with them was I believe it was, I can't remember the lineage, but all around a couple year period, I had been worked on an Undergang record. Eric did a solo for that record, and then Mortuous had a record that had both Chris did guest vocals and Danny did a solo on it, and then I was doing a record for Eric called Necrosic that he was on. We recorded here and I mixed, and then I was doing Violation Wound stuff for which was Chris's punk band. So like there was just kind of like all within it was probably around 3 year period. All these things were happening, and then eventually they were like, "Hey, we want to record Puncturing the Grotesque EP with you." And that was my first time having Autopsy in the studio. And it was cool working with them. And I was like, this is awesome, And they showed up with Chris's drum kit in the back of a pickup truck, as completely assembled, cymbals on stands and everything. And they just walked it in the live room and set it down. And I was like, do you want me to tune it or anything? And Chris like, no, that's good. And then it was it was one of those like just okay, let's like buckle in, this is going to be a fast one. I think we recorded everything in like 2 days or something, like two
That
or
is
three
pretty
days
punk rock.
Yeah, it was super fast. So that was my experience, intro with Autopsy. And then fast forward a few years, COVID happens. We've been friends at this point, and I hang out with them at shows and whatever. And so my recording studio, because of lockdown and how small my studio is, it's like under 1,000 square feet for everything. So it's pretty small. Um, my friend had a beautiful venue in San Francisco called Great American Music Hall. It's like an old vintage wood floors, like balconies. There's a beautiful theater, and they were shut down. San Francisco was like no live shows, period. And so my friend was managing. He said, I was talking to him. I was like, dude, your band practices here. Let me bring my gear and record you. And he's like, how about this? How about you just move all your gear here, track bands here, where we can social distance and, we have some ventilation and stuff, and everyone can be, whatever protocols and stuff. So I wound up doing that. And I was texting with Chris and I said, hey, do you want to just jam for no reason and record stuff? He's like, what's your plan? I was like, I have zero plans. I'll have a drum kit. You show up, you bang on them. I'll play some strings and we'll see what happens. Well, meanwhile, wasn't aware that Joe was leaving the band. And so Chris was like, I guess he threw my name in the hat as like a suggestion. And then Eric was like, I'm gonna call him right now. Like, let's just get him to come down, and stuff. And so then it kind of worked out where, we did Chris and I did the thing. We called it Static Abyss. We went up finishing an album. And then I went to try out for Autopsy, and then I pretty much got a phone call like a couple days later, and he said, you got the gig if you want it. So that was it. It just went from there, lots of practicing, and they had pretty much written the Morbidity Triumphant before I joined. Like a lot of the songs were already done, so I kind of walked into like in the middle, but they still gave me, free reign on whatever bass lines I wanted to play and that kind of stuff and input. But they had already had that lined up with another recording engineer that they were already using and whatnot. So when we did the last record, it was cool because I was able to actually be part of the production side of it too. And we wrote the album front to back all together with me in the band. And so it was really fun working on that record with them. They're just such fun people to play music with. And, we're all still get really excited about riffs and whatnot. And everyone is just, it's really hard. Like nobody really says, no, you can't do that.
Yeah.
When somebody has a song or riffs, everyone's like, yeah, let's do it. And everyone kind of puts their own input in and makes it sound like Autopsy, and I like that. I think we kind of harken to some of the, Severed Survival and Mental Funeral energy in on that record,
Yeah.
especially.
I liked as well that like you can really hear the bass. I always appreciate it in metal. I mean, in music in general, but in a lot of metal, you don't really get prominent bass. So like, I really enjoyed the lines that you were playing on that record too, and the fact that you could
Oh,
hear them
thank
really
you.
well.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fun.
Are you about to jump into another interview?
Nope.
Okay, I won't
No.
keep you much longer. Have I got you? I got you for a couple more questions.
Yeah, yeah, I'm here.
Cool. I wanted to something I'm always curious about when I interview people that play extreme music or technical music. I'm curious to know like what the starting point was of learning instruments. I mean, I guess one question first of all, did you start out as a bass player or a guitar player?
I started as a bass player.
Okay.
So, and then I got a guitar in high school, so I learned how to play it, but I played guitar like a high school bass player, honestly, forever. So,
Do you remember what the first things were that you were playing?
you mean just musically in general?
Yeah, just like in terms of like picking up an instrument and just kind of like learning to play with other songs.
Yeah, honestly, very early on, I was kind of everywhere from like learning stuff like, early Meat Puppets and Butthole Surfers and like kind of like more punk stuff like that. I was really, really too intimidated at first to like mess around with like Iron Maiden and things like that. I wasn't quite at that level. So I did learn with my fingers. So I would just learn like, kind of more punk stuff with my fingers. And eventually kind of got more, obviously the very first riff I ever learned, and I feel like everyone in the world is going to say this if they listen to metal, was Iron Man. So like that was my first. Geezer Butler, for some reason, as amazing of a bass player as he was, I was less intimidated at learning his bass parts than I was like learning like Steve Harris or something. And I think it's maybe just because of how it's packaged in a way, because it was like Steve Harris's bass is like more up front and crazy, whereas like in Sabbath, like it was more blended and stuff. So yeah, like my very first thing was honestly was Iron Man, and then but then yeah, it was like a lot of punk records and stuff. But then I was fortunate enough to have friends. I had around the same time I got my bass, I had a friend that got a guitar and another friend that got a drum kit. So we just jammed together. So we would honestly just write a lot of original stuff. And then I had another friend that had a drum kit. And then I met a third person with a drum kit. So like that one guitar player and I would go and jam with different people and stuff. And that was like a lot of the informative playing, and then I would be at home and kind of make stuff on my own. I had a stereo where I could plug my bass into a tape deck, record a bass line, switch the tapes around, play that tape back, and then track on top of it. And it was kind of a primitive ping-ponging, as you will, you know?
Yeah. I remember doing something similar where I had a double cassette player and just like recording, like I think I did even like a biscuit tin kind of drum thing, and then I put an acoustic guitar on top, and then like a kind of a bass thing that I did on a guitar, and just like, like 5 or 6 layers on a cassette that would have been, I mean, I suppose, to be fair, like old black metal, like the really lo-fi recording was kind of part of the charm of it, so it doesn't all have to be high fidelity.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you're on the same, ilk, and I think a lot of people listening to this are too, where, I think a lot of us have grown up listening to really crappy recordings and wouldn't, and I've actually now I think we've all seen stuff re-recorded and the recording changes into a more, I guess like today industry standard sound. And a lot of times it just doesn't have the same thing, like that,
Yeah.
like sometimes things are meant to not be perfect or rough around the edges, otherwise you start to take the life out of it, and I was just talking to my friend John Gossard. He does that band Dispirit, and he was in Asunder and stuff, but we actually had a funny conversation the other day about this where he was talking about listening to certain stuff, and he's like, it's the recording's so crappy that you're like, it sounds amazing, like I don't know what they're playing, but the riffs sound cool and heavy. And then listening to certain things get re-recorded, and it's like, wow, that's kind of a crappy riff, like
When you can
all
really
of a
hear what's
sudden
going on.
the veil drops and you're like, that's actually not that cool. It was,
I was watching an interview, or it was like a documentary of Napalm Death, and Mick Harris was saying in it that he actually doesn't ever want to have any record he's played on be remastered or re-recorded, because he's just like, the way it is in the beginning is the way it is, and that's it. Do you have like sort of as strong an opinion in that sense, or do you think that redoing an album in the right context can be worth it?
so the only like blanket statement, you should not re-record a record. Remastering, I think, is acceptable because sometimes things weren't mastered at all. So like mastering it could be cool, and you're not changing the relationship of the mix, right? You're maybe just kind of sprucing something up and stuff, or like for example, something that was never mastered in 1990, for example, like might not like sound very good on Spotify or YouTube or something when you're like in a playlist of things. It's not going to keep up, right? It's going to be this quiet kind of dark thing. So like, bringing it up to speed with what's going around it is I think okay. I've actually, one thing I heard recently that was remastered but not remixed was a Kraftwerk LP series. And the remaster, I had the same LP like from back in like I think it was like 1979 or whenever it came out, and played them back to back. And like the new version just sounds snappier and better, but it doesn't it's still the same mix. So like remastering is kind of a maybe. Re-recording stuff, the only time I could see that happening, and it doesn't necessarily make it better, but if a band is contractually screwed and they can't release it, the label won't repress it, the label won't relinquish it to another label to put it out. I've seen bands go through that. It's an unfortunate situation because I'm probably not going to listen to it. I'd like the original, because the thing is trying to come and revisit something from 25 years ago. What you've essentially done when you've recorded something is you've captured lightning in a bottle, and those people are going to be that age. that time on whatever drugs they're on or drunk or whatever. You're capturing this moment and this dynamic between these people. Now, fast forward like 35 years later, and have them, or maybe a group of people with some original members, try to reinvent that with a totally different recording production, different guitar tones, different drum sounds and everything. It's it's not the same thing. It's like maybe at best you're going to be like, that's a cool cover band, because those people are going to be different. So, um, I'm also like, that being said, I'm not against people remixing stuff. I mean, do what you do, There's no hard rules, but at the same time, like, that's my personal opinion is I think I would rather see a band write something new
Yeah,
than trying to reinvent the wheel. Now, if you want to re-record a song, like for example, I Hate God would always their songs would always kind of be re-recorded onto the updated next album, kind of thing. That kind of stuff is fine. Or like Spitz does that, where they'll like re-record the song a same song and it winds up on like three different albums but the energy and the vibe is totally different and it fits that specific record. I think
yeah.
Devo was like king of that, back in the day. And that kind of stuff is cool, but trying to recapture a record 30 years after it already happened is not my thing. That's my
Yeah.
opinion.
No, that does make a lot of sense. The you brought up Eyehategod. I love Eyehategod. I've got all their albums on vinyl, and I've seen them a couple of times. I saw them just before the pandemic when I lived in Prague. They were supporting Napalm Death, and I think they permanently fucked my hearing because of like the crazy, horrible high pitch feedback that Jimmy Bauer
Yes.
has. I felt it like go right in my ear, and it was never quite
Yep.
the same since then. But I still love them, and I still went to go see them a second time. So no hard feelings about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, there's something about like them, and there's a lot of like early bands that got into like the SS like 150Hs or the SS 140C and guitar amps that are like they're just this solid state, gritty, nasty sounding amps. And like I Hate God is like a great example of I've been seeing these amps come back. I own one. I love it. It's like just this solid state static is like really the first time I came across something like that. I was doing a punk band called Born Dead, and the guitar player had like the VH, which is like the newer model. It was from like the early 90s, and it was just a little higher gain, but like I'd listen to his old recordings, and I was just like, you're getting, because he's like trying to use Marshalls and stuff, right? And I'm like, I think you need to bring that amp. That amp sounds specific. And if we're gonna try to like make the recording sound more, the guitar tones sound like that, you need that amp. That amp has that sound. Like it's just a different, unique sound. And there's something, especially the early I Hate God stuff, those amps are all over it. And it's like a huge part of that. And those feedback is just it's very unforgiving. So
Yeah, that's a good word for it for sure. So, in terms of then the forthcoming Deathgrave album and the way you're going to be promoting it, have you got some shows lined up with the band?
So we've been doing some shows. We just went to Japan and came back, and then we just played with Psy in Sacramento. And then so we're gonna do like an official record release coming up in September with Necrot and Iron Lung at Great American Music Hall, which is the place where I had my studio for a minute. And but yeah, so like we have that show, and then we're playing a festival in Sacramento after, but we're not this time around. We're kind of just being selective about shows, only just for financial reasons. I think, like going to Japan was quite expensive to do it, but we really wanted to play out there, and so on this run. We are working on other things, but nothing is confirmed right now. But we're gonna do like just a little string of dates and be a little more selective and regional, I guess you could say. Doing like a 6 week tour right now for us is not realistic and stuff,
Yeah.
but we are not like a cost-effective band. We're the kind of band that will fly across the country to play 3 shows, and come back and so like we're working on little things like that where we can do little small visits and and that way we can all get back to our job and we can afford to lose money at having fun like that and
Yeah.
just, you know, going where we're wanted rather than foisting ourselves in the middle of the country where they don't care.
Yeah, well, as long as you're enjoying it, I mean, that's the main thing.
Yes.
And not
Yeah.
being financially crippled by it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Every record we've done we were doing all these like tours every time and we always had fun and it was great, but it's, like Fern, our bass player, she's a college professor, so trying to do that kind of stuff in the middle of a semester is just it's like not fun. It's really stressful. And then, for her, and she has fun for sure doing it, but it's always like, okay, I gotta get up at 5 in the morning and grade exams and do do things that are not
Yeah.
fun to do on tour. So we with the album coming out in September, it kind of made it. And then like Andre, his day job, like usually around anytime there's holidays, which we've got like, all the sports things and Halloween and Thanksgiving and Christmas, all screws his schedule up, and same for our drummer. So it's like kind of one of those things where we're like, we're just gonna stick at home and do that. And I'm just gonna keep making records over here in Oakland, and we're just gonna do little small trips. And I think it's gonna be just as fun.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So, in general, then, for people that want to follow what's going on with the band and find out, dates that are coming up, etc., where is the best place for them to go?
I would say Instagram if you have it. We have an Instagram site, Deathgrave 408. That's kind of where we, are the most frequently updating stuff and posting. But I guarantee you, we will not like barrage your feed with a post every day, forever. We're not one of those bands. We really just make posts when things are happening and stuff. So
Yeah,
and then, yeah, it's usually that. And then, for more releases, like if you go on our Bandcamp newsletter, we will notify you when we have releases and things like that as well there. And then we will be having music videos we're working on, and those will be coming out as well. So
nice,
we have a small YouTube page as well. So you can go visit us, our YouTube channel and stuff
cool.
as well. So that's pretty much about it. And we're pretty lo-fi and like DIY about everything. So we don't have like management or anything like that doing all our social media. It's
Yeah,
going to be one of us. So,
that's
you
cool.
know, we'll keep everyone up to speed, especially if you get on that Instagram one. We'll definitely be informing you anything that's happening.
And in terms of the various other stuff that you got going on, is there anything else that you'd like to mention or promote?
Well, there's I mentioned Static Abyss. We have another record that we have our third album coming out, and we actually had Chad from Necrot play drums on that one. So it'll be me, it'll be Chad playing drums, I'm doing all the string work, and then Chris Reifert singing. So it'll just be the three of us. But that's actually coming out August 28th on Peaceville. So
Cool.
those are the this for some reason they're both coming out and within like a week of each other. I don't plan this stuff, so but those are the two things that I can mention right now that I'm excited about both. And but I encourage you to please come check this stuff out. I'm really proud of both records. So but it depends on what flavor you want. You want the more death metal or you want the grinding madness. So
Nice.
it's there, and check it out.
Well, I'm definitely down for both. So, yeah, Greg, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to chat to you.
Yeah,
Uh,
likewise.
Thanks a lot for your time.